My friend, the greatest, I'm going to say it, the greatest talk show sidekick of all time.
Wow, well, that's very kind of you. The greatest inanimate talk show sidekick of all time.
Well, obviously, but I mean,
Yeah.
even Ed McMahon or Andy Richter, you give them a run for your money as Geoff Peterson, the
Yeah.
robot skeleton. I'm a huge fan. I
Oh,
love
that's
Craig
nice.
Ferguson. What he
Thank
did
you.
for the forum of late night, it was so freed up. And then you came along. Tell us about the genesis of being a skeleton
Huh.
robot sidekick.
Well, I mean, the short story is I was doing public access TV, local access, local TV, whatever you call it in your city. I had been doing a bunch of shows of my own for years, for about 10 years. I was coming in on the end of a 10-year run of doing a bunch of shows, and one of the writers from the Late Late Show saw one of my programs. I was doing my preacher character, the Reverend Apostle B.G. Holiness, half hour of power, and Joe Struzzulo, he emailed me and said, "Hey man, I write for this show, and what else do you do?" And then that was it. That was 2007, man. That was
2007.
February 2007. I started doing Arnold Schwarzenegger, fantastic. Craig, how are you? This is wonderful. And they would put me in all this makeup and the muscle suit, and yeah, how are you? And that's how it started, man. I just started doing little appearances here and there on the show. And then honestly, after several years of that, this wasn't overnight. Craig just decided that, I think it would be great if I had, like a robot, like a sidekick, I want to like sort of send up the idea of late night.
Did you talk to him yet?
No, I don't talk to dummies. How are
Hey,
you?
Don, hey. Hey, look, I'm a big fan of your earlier work.
Thanks.
Before the talkies, I mean.
Would you like to hear my Morgan Freeman voice?
Anyway, so Craig wanted to have this robot skeleton sidekick that would sort of make fun of the late night thing.
I mean, it's truly poked fun. It was very like the deconstruction of late night.
Yeah, I mean, I think his whole idea was that, and also the idea of the constant presence of death. As Geoff Peterson is a skeleton,
Sure.
and death is often depicted as a skeleton in a robe with the scythe. That's what it was. It was the idea of like, yeah, we're all having fun here, but death is over there physically in the corner. And so Craig did the voice himself, or pre-recorded in a very kind of robotic voice like this. Hello, Craig. Ha, ha, ha. Everything was very sort of mechanical. And then, I don't know, it must have been maybe a couple weeks in, he asked if I wanted to do it. And I said, sure, let's see what happens. But I don't think it was, it was probably a year after that of my doing pre-recorded phrases.
It was a year pre-recorded.
A year of pre-recorded phrases where I would go in, and Tom Straw, another writer on the show, and a great author as well, very funny guy, and Bob Oshak, brilliant comedian. He now writes for Bill Maher. He's a genius. They collectively were writing, Bulls and In Your Pants and Sex Party. So I would just go in every couple of weeks and, recite the lines. And that was it. And then they would put those little various pieces of dialogue into an iPad, and just probably one of the writers or someone would sit and press a button and it would make Geoff move. But I didn't really start puppeteering and doing it live, I think, until a year after that. So it was a very long, slow gestation period.
Mm-hmm.
At any moment, Craig could have gotten bored, as he often did with everything. The sound machine, different effects. I don't want to do that anymore. I'm done. I'm tired of it, man. And it didn't happen. He just kept doing this robot. So
Something seemed to click with him. You mentioned him sort of just saying it, in like, yeah, it's just so to put it together like this. Like, was it that simple? I mean, he literally put those bizarre elements together, and there it was.
Yeah, I think it was. I don't know who. Somebody mentioned it the subject came up of a robot skeleton army. There's a robot skeleton army that will rise up or whatever. We'd always joke about it. And then there was some kind of a bet made between he and the late Grant Imahara, who, very sadly, we lost Grant, I don't know, maybe a month ago now, a couple months ago, from Mythbusters. Grant is the guy that built Geoff the Robot. Grant is the one who, yeah. Yeah, so there was some kind of bet, like, if you can get me a certain number of followers, then I will build you your robot. And, of course, Craig came through, and then Grant had to build this robot. So, Grant showed me how to puppeteer Geoff Peterson. A lot of people don't know. Look, there's a lot of people that don't know that I'm the guy who did Geoff the Robot. So I appreciate this because
of course
it's been the source of a bit of consternation for me that it's like people loved this character and they still love this character, but they don't know who the guy is that did the character. It's crazy, right?
There's a serious reverence for him, and I think that has only grown. And you can even see it on your Twitter recently.
Yeah,
that you're embracing it. Was there any block between you saying? I mean, was there? You on the show? You do say it at some point. You came on. I don't know if it was the night you did stand up, but Craig talks to you with the.
Yeah, it was the second. It was the second to last night. That before we were the second to last show when I came on, and he introduced me. But what people they didn't realize that not only did I do the voice, but I also controlled and operated all of Geoff's movements, and I also, had a box of instruments and things. So I was making all these sounds with a slide whistle and a harmonica, and in addition to puppeteering Geoff and the Sandra the talking rhino above the fireplace. So, there's a lot going on. If you could see it, I think it would make it more real for people. And there is a video I just put together that you're referring to that was like a 4-minute compilation of just that. You can sort of see me controlling the puppet. But I think the thing is, it wasn't so much that the show was trying to keep me in the shadows, although they did want to maintain that air of mystery, like it's a real robot.
Sure.
I just think that, I've heard from a lot of people, and they're very nice about it, but they'll just tell me point blank, I really didn't want to know that there was anyone behind the robot. So is that dog a robot? Is that a real dog, or is that a robot?
This is Kanye Westy. He is my sidekick.
Good sidekick. Much cuter.
He's something, isn't he? Look at this guy.
Wow. How do you operate? That
just
dog? Is it
just a little?
Little. That's I see. It's a rod puppet. Okay, so
that's right. Yeah, just go from underneath and
very realistic. It's really nice,
right?
Man.
The eyes, especially. I have to do that. I was doing that with I do that with my foot on a little computer pad. That's how we got his eyes to. Yeah.
That's how Craig had an old time telephone on his desk, and I would make it ring by pressing a button with my foot. So, and Grant Imahara is the one who. My point earlier was that Grant Imahara is the one that showed me how to. He walked me through it and showed me how to puppeteer the robot. And, every time that Geoff's mouth would move, I had to press this button like that. So it became second nature to me. At one point, I had 2 remote units hanging off of my neck, one for the rhino and one for Geoff. And I think one episode, Craig kind of screwed with me a little bit and wanted to see if I could have a conversation as both characters, so we were all sort of talking to each other.
Oh yeah.
Very fun. So yeah, I mean, it's the weirdest, it's one of the weirder job descriptions, I think, in this industry. It's like you're behind a wall and it is amazing. I mean, look, I never really realized truly how many people remembered or loved, or how many people this impacted, this show. I mean, people still talk about it, obviously. I never was upset at all by being Geoff Peterson. I love it. I think the only thing, again, that was really frustrating for me was like, they didn't know it was me, and so, that's all it was. So yeah, I mean, look, so if I ever went off on anybody, if you ever got caught in my crossfire, I'm sorry. All right. It's going to be okay.
How was the improv between the two of you as Geoff? How much of it was prepared? How much, as you moved forward, was just off the cuff?
Oh, we try. I think there was one time only where So Bob Oshak was one of the writers at the show, and he would, with a group of other folks, they would work on the monologue material, which then we would often summarily dismiss and have a conversation of our own. All due respect to the writers, and I'll tell you this, week after week, sometimes we would get the same pages of monologue. I would get the monologue sent to my office as well, just so I could look over it and make notes on things. Maybe if he stays on something, maybe I'll talk about that.
Right.
But I mean, I had like 10 minutes to do that. This isn't like I didn't have time. But but it just was funny to me because what you never saw was week after week, sometimes we'd get the same pages of monologue that we continued to ignore week after week. And it'd be like, all right, they're going to try to shoehorn that in again. All right, well, we're just probably not going to do that.
If you guys kept throwing it out, they just assumed, well, why do we have to write new stuff?
That's, of course, I mean, that's, this is all part of the spirit of play. But I think, so what would happen is Bob, the writer, would go to Craig's dressing room as Craig was getting his makeup done. And they would kind of run through things. And he would say, nah, let's get rid of that. I don't want to talk about that. Okay, that's fine. Nah, leave that out, whatever. I started to accompany Bob to these little meetings. And about 2 of those get-togethers in, we both decided that it was a bad idea because we started to riff in the dressing room, and then we'd already used it up. So, as Craig always said, it was one of the purest forms of improv because look, he couldn't see me, right? So, I mean, physically, he couldn't see me during the show. He could only see the robot, So he's doing improv basically with this puppet, having no idea what I'm going to say. I could see him on a monitor. I had them cut out a little piece of this wall that I stood next to so I could also physically see Craig. Because when Craig was looking at Geoff the robot, his line of sight was way off from where I was actually standing. So I needed to know when he was physically looking at Geoff because then I knew, he's addressing me. I'm so thankful that he said to me, let's have you try and do the voice, man. Let's see what happens,
Was there ever any Craig on Craig action, by the way? Because your impression of him is so good. Did you?
I would do it all the time. And he'd always say, it sounds like Mrs. Doubtfire, man. It's not good, man. I'm like, no, man.
He's wrong. He's wrong.
You, man.
He's wrong.
You, man. Well, Craig would. So what I had to learn quickly too is that Craig, when he talked to the robot, the robot's personality began to evolve. It started out as like, ooh, hi, how are you? Because the note that I was given was that they wanted it to be like George Takei, right? So like, oh my, ooh. And to be honest with you, I respected their decision, but I never liked that because George Takei is already a person who exists in the world. And I kept saying, well, if he's a robot, he must have programming that allows him to speak in different voices, obviously wanting to shoehorn my own abilities in there. And they said, no, let's just relax. And I understand why they did it that way because, again, you're introducing a new element into this show that had already been on for a little while. Craig, being the host of the show with his name on the show, I wouldn't be in a hurry to share the stage with some other person I don't really know, me. So let's just delicately introduce this robot and let's see what happens. And that's what Craig said to me. He said, look, the first time we did the first live Geoff, and by live I mean I was in the studio puppeteering and voicing Geoff. And I mean I was sweating bullets. Like, how am I going to... He says, look, man, just take your time, just like... when I look at you and talk to you, that's when, but don't let's not go crazy, man. Let's see what, and I think it was less about him being worried about like someone chewing up the scenery as much as I think he really wanted this thing to work. And I think he knew how the corporate suits and the executives worked better than me. So it was like, let's just see how this goes, And I mean, maybe a few weeks after that, I did the famous, I got a place there bit.
You been down on the bayou there, Geoff?
Oh, hell yeah. I go there at least once a year.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you have a place down there?
I do. I've got a little pad down there.
Really?
You should come down sometime.
You know, I'd love to. That's a great idea. We could. What do you do down there? Go fishing?
Yeah, we go fishing and we throw beads at people. We take our clothes off, go swimming. Just you and me together.
So just like what we do here, then, basically.
Yeah.
Suddenly, Geoff Peterson has a place everywhere in the world, and for whatever reason, it struck us as funny because
It's perfect yes and. I mean, it's just
yes
simple.
and right, exactly. And I remember at the end of that show, Craig walked past my dressing room, which at the time was right. It was like right when you walked out of the main stage, the dressing room was right there. So you saw everybody coming through those doors. And he just pointed to me and he's like, that was fucking great, man. Fucking great. We got to do this all the time. Now, we only did the robot live still once a week. It was still like a trial by fire. It was like, let's see how he does next week, you know? Let's see how it does next week. And then we did a show in Vegas, Craig and Geoff Peterson's wedding in Vegas. We did like our version of The Hangover. And I mean, I was there the whole time riffing with him and making shit up, and I would make him laugh, and he was like, all right, man, you know what? We got to do this every night, man. And so honestly, I owe it to him. I mean, again, it's not like an overnight thing. This was a long period of like appearing on the show, doing characters, figuring it out. And I think he knew that we could make it happen. Man, it was such a cool thing to do. It was so much fun.